And welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. This is Patrick at Qdabra, and I'm glad to have you here today. Good morning, good evening. I think we have a couple of people from Europe here on the call, at least one person. So thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about going beyond a limit in SharePoint. And this is a limit that's been there for a long time. It's the 5,000 item limit, or 20,000 if you're using the modern view. We got just a couple quick poll questions here to get us in the mood. First question is, have you ever seen the SharePoint library or list item limit? And I've got a picture of this in a second. If you have not, we can review it. Great. Looks like we have most of you in the yes camp. I don't see anyone responding with no, so you're in the right place for the webinar. Most of you have seen it more than one time or twice, so you're many times. So thank you for answering that quick question. We're going to switch to the next quick question, and that is, what did you do when you saw the error or the issue? And there's lots of options. We're going to be presenting an option that doesn't appear on the normal suggestion list today, which is moving your data to SQL. And it's a great option for a bunch of reasons. We're going to be talking about why that is. It's also a great option if you want to move off SharePoint completely. Most of the time when we talk to customers, we'll tell them to do the index column option. That's a quick fix. Sometimes you can switch to modern and get a little more mileage out of it. 20,000 items in modern is really not that many items. So, if you want a large scale solution, you really need to think about customizing the view rendering, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we have about 67% of you indexing, and then I think 33% or 1%. There's only 3 people that answer the poll going to modern. So thanks for that. So no one else answered anything else. So so today we're talking about, this is the concept. Obviously, we have a great solution for you. And I want to give a little bit of background first. Qdabra has been around since 2003. And one of our first big jobs, typically we do a lot of consulting with SharePoint, but we also help customers get over these SharePoint limits. So we fill these gaps. One of the first big projects we had was with Microsoft. Microsoft had a marketing application. They were collecting tens of thousands of marketing campaign forms per month, and they quickly hit this issue. And so we went to Microsoft and we helped them extend beyond this by using the technique that we're going to talk to you today about. And Microsoft then used this technique for many of the solutions we built for them. And this was back in before 2010, and those solutions, many of them lived for many, many years, but we don't have any more of those solutions at Microsoft. Microsoft has moved to something else for all of their InfoPath solutions. And of course, we have a solution to move you off of InfoPath as well. We'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. But first, we're going to be talking about these. These are the bullets for today. This is what was in the webinar. A lot of text here. I'm just going to quickly recap it. Why are we moving off of SharePoint? Why are we presenting this database accelerator tool? That's DBXL. Why are we doing that today? Well, like I just said, we're showing you an option to move off of SharePoint, move your data off of SharePoint, but you could also move off of SharePoint completely with the solution that we have. And it doesn't use InfoPath. It uses Qdabra Forms, which is a replacement for InfoPath. And we'll talk more about that at the end. But anyway, it gives you the flexibility to control your views. You can customize the filters much more. Obviously, speed up your query time. There's a reporting option. So SharePoint is 2-dimensional. You get a table or a list. You can point Power BI at it, and it works just great. But if you need to do multi-dimensional cubes, better reporting, pivots, things like that, then you'll want your data in SQL, and you'll want to have control of how you map that repeating data out. In SharePoint, it's hard to do that, and there's no data integrity. Now, SharePoint is using SQL behind the scenes, and so you'd think that you'd have the customization option, but they just don't allow you to do that because it would be too hard for them to maintain, especially when you have these online tenants. Jimmy, anything else to add to this? I'm happy to introduce Jimmy Risch, who's going to be our key demo driver, demo god today. Jimmy, nice to have you here.
Hello.
Yep. Anything to add to this slide?
Yeah, it's just one of, don't see it mentioned here, but one of the main benefits of having the data in your own database is it gives you a lot more freedom in terms of how you can use it and query it and do all sorts of complex aggregation and stuff like that. So that's really useful.
So there's a lot of features that we're going to be talking about today, but we give you these tools to move your data off of SharePoint. So it's a lot easier to just take your list data, take your library data, and move it to SQL. And that's what we're going to be demoing today is these tools. And we have a bunch of steps. I'm just going to quickly jump to the demo. We're going to come back to this slide later, but in general, there's like a number of steps you can do, and then you're off SharePoint. So we'll go through that. First up, though, let's talk about how to move those lists and libraries from SharePoint to SQL. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the schema. That's the column data. That's the essentially it's the column data. It's which properties you're promoting, or it's the list column data. And we need to be able to export that from SharePoint into SQL. That's the first step. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is how to do the data. So Jimmy, I think at this point, I'm going to switch to you. And if anyone has any questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to throw the questions into the question. There's a question area in GoToWebinar. Jimmy, I'm just switching to you as presenter.
Okay, so we recently had a customer who was trying to do this and move some of their SharePoint stuff into a database. They had a whole bunch of lists that they wanted to migrate over, and we were faced with the prospect of having to create, by hand, a database table for each one of them, so there's a place to put it. So I thought maybe we'd make things a little more efficient by just putting together a little bit of code to, just take the list schema and generate a table creation script for it. So I made that. At first, it was a runnable command line thing, but we figured it'd be nice to share this with other people who might benefit from it. So I've actually packaged it into a form that you can upload to Forms Viewer and use it. So here I am in my form, just the schema generator form. You can just upload it and use it. There's no configuration steps. It'll automatically populate with the current site URL, but I could specify a different one if I wanted to. And I query the lists. It gives me a drop down of all the lists in the site. And today we're going to be talking about migrating this resources list. So here it's auto-populated this table name for me. I can use a different name if I want. Click that. And there's my script. So basically it looked at the data types of all the columns. Most of these are text columns, so I'm getting invarchar. But let's see, let's pick another one at random. Here, this has a date time. So basically it figures out the data types and sort of changes them into a corresponding database data type for you. And in some cases, there are things like lookup columns and multi-user columns that don't translate very well into a database. So in that case, it's just going to give you some warnings down here, and it'll put unknown as the data type. It won't just stop. So you'll usually have a couple of fix-ups here you'll want to make. Like instead of ID, I'm going to use a doc ID since it's DBXL, stuff like that. You can change the data types. If you know the name is not going to be unlimited, you can do something like that. Okay, so once I've got my script, I can just take it over here to my database. Run it. There we go. Refresh my tables. And there it is. So it's just a bit of a time saver if you've got a lot of lists you want to migrate over. It'll save you the hassle of having to, add all these tables one column at a time. you usually want to fix them up a little bit, change the data types and column names and whatnot, but I think you'll save a whole bunch of time.
You mentioned resources, and this is a list that the form that we're going to demo is using, right? We have an expense report form that we're going to demo in a moment or two. And in the expense report form queries this list. So when you're moving your data from SharePoint to SQL, it's not just the target data, in this case, expense report form that we're going to show in a minute, that we're moving, but also the satellite lists, the data that it queries, in this case, the resources list, and other lists, because you really want to take advantage of SQL, then you want to move all of the data that it's referencing over. You don't have to move all the data. You can still have the forms open from SQL and query the SharePoint data. Obviously, if you're moving off SharePoint completely, then you want to move everything over. In any case, sometimes you have a list that is really large and you want to move that over anyway because querying it from SQL is going to be a lot faster.
Yeah, and it may even be the case that your main forms are not numerous, but it's just consuming some list that's huge, and maybe that's the only thing you move over at first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great. And you mentioned FormsViewer, and this is our replacement for InfoPath. I think pretty much everyone on this call knows about FormsViewer and Qdabra Forms. You have now Forms Designer. And thanks for all of your support over the years for those of you who are using that product. FormsViewer and Forms Designer are the replacements for InfoPath, and we have the only app out there that allows you to move your forms over without changing them. So the forms that Jimmy, that sample form that he showed, and the expense report form that we're going to show next, they're actually still using the old InfoPath format, the XSN format, even though they're being rendered in our Qdabra Forms app. So it's really easy to move your existing form investments over to off of InfoPath if you want to do that. And I'll talk more about that at the end. Okay, so let's go back to the slides if you don't mind, Jimmy, and go to the next one.
Yep. Okay, so here we go. Demo 2 Did you want to talk to this, or?
Well, just make a comment, and then we're gonna demo this. So Jimmy just created the schema in SQL, the table structure, and then the next step is to move the data from that list, in this case resources, into that, and that's and then we're going to talk about moving the actual data from the form library. But first, let's if you're going to move that list data over, it's not just about creating the table. You have to actually move the data over too, right?
Right. So I have done a bit of prep work ahead of time, because if we wanted to show this from the very beginning, it would fit into the webinar. But basically, so I assume most of you are somewhat familiar with DBXL, but basically you set up a form type and you can map it to a database table. So I had previously added a resource demo table like this, same columns as the one I just created in my demo. And I've mapped out, I also created an XSN template with the fields to hold those data values, because until now it's just been a list. We don't have a form template for it. So this is just a sort of place to hold the data. We've got fields for each of the columns that we're using. No view, because as in, not using the form to modify it, we're just using it as a sort of way to represent this data structure. And so I've uploaded that here. I've mapped the fields to the database column, so there's a correspondence there. So now what I can do is come into my list. I've got this export button here, so I'm going to export it to Excel. And that actually gives you this query file, which opens up in Excel. And I'm going to enable the query, and this Excel is actually pulling the data from SharePoint right now. Okay, so it populated all the data from the list. We've only got 4 items, and then I'm going to save this out as an XLSX file. Let's see. I'm going to save that in here. Okay, so that is saved to my local drive. Now I'm going to come back to the DBXL admin tool, and we've got this import tab here. And here we can define a mapping from an Excel file to the XML structure. So I've already prepared this ahead of time as well. Just to point out the settings here, I've got a mapping name, just a name for this mapping. I'm using indexes, which is the way to check whether the particular record has already been uploaded or not. And I've defined an index over here. I've called it index email, and that index is using this field from the form. That's basically what I'm using as my unique ID for the purposes of importing. And that email index is going to correspond to the email column in the Excel file. And then down here, I'm mapping the Excel columns to the XML fields. And there's the root information up here, and I'm telling it sheet name is query because this is query. And that's pretty much it. That's all I need to do. So now I'm just gonna pick my file, book one, and just to show you there's no smoke and mirrors here, this table should currently be empty. Yep, it's empty. So I'm going to import. And what this is doing, it's actually going through the rows in the Excel file and creating an XML file for each row and adding that XML file to DBXL. And then each of those added files will go through the database mapping, go out to the database, and here's my data all imported in my database table.
That's great, Jimmy. If you go to the Documents tab and show them that we actually have 4 XML files that were generated from that.
Yeah, so here are the documents that it just generated.
So this database accelerator tool that we developed first for Microsoft back in 2005, actually there was one customer before Microsoft. It was a hospital in Olympia, Washington, with the capital. They had patient records using it. But we've got hundreds and hundreds of enterprises using this tool over the years, and still a lot of active customers, over 100 active customers using the tool. It's got a lot of stuff in it. So it's got this ability to map data from XML data into your database, and you can have any level of direction. You can have a parent, child, grandchild. You can map your repeating data to repeating structure, custom table structure that you have. You can query data from SQL. You can actually import data. So Jimmy's showing how to do these tools for importing data. And we also have emails and reminders and other things. So just want to give people a little bit. I know most of you already are familiar with this tool, but I just want to give a little more background. Awesome. Okay, what's next, Jimmy?
All right, so next is import form data into DBXL, into SQL. But I realized it looks like I should talk to what we did in the form to get it to query, because I don't think we have a demo for that. So let me just include that in demo 2. So of course, once the data is in the database, we want the form to pull from there instead of pulling from the list. So basically, what I've done here is I've added a new data connection to our QueryDB service, which is another part of DBXL for querying data from the database. I set up a little bit of form logic here to run that query. Just uses a query string, including any filter values and the column names we want, and just query it, just a few steps, query. And then I've got some logic here that sort of triggers this little bit of logic down here, and then just copies the values over into the fields.
Can you show them? Can you show them in DBXL where you can create that query using Query Builder?
Yeah. Let's see. Query Builder. So
we have to go through the whole thing, but just to show people that we actually have this tool for building that query string.
Yeah. Let's see. I want the demo database and resource. Oh, yeah, so we've got this little builder for putting together those query strings that you can use. We've also got documentation on all of this stuff, of course, but here this builds up those query strings so I can use them in my form.
And that's where, and go back to the form again and show them where that is one more time. So that's
right here where I perform my query. I'm sort of using a concat to include my filter values in the filter portion of the query. You can see username here.
that's a query.
And then it's indicating which columns to query, and I want to get the rows where O365 username is equal to this value.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward. And then just to see the form in action, I can open up a new form. And here it's pulling in my manager information from the database.
Great.
Okay, so on to the next demo is importing the form data into SQL. So we talked about moving list data. There are also going to be cases where you want to move the actual XML data. So we have a way to do that as well. So ordinarily you would want to move all your documents into DBXL. We're just going to migrate a few since this is just a demo. So I'm going to download these 5.
And this is the expense report form library, right?
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm going to extract these. When I download more than one, it comes down as a zip file. Okay, so here are the 5 files that I downloaded. I've actually set up our tool for importing these on the actual DBXL VM. Of course, it's faster and less risky to do it on the actual machine, so there's no transmission problems. It's direct connection. So I'm just going to open up the tool here, Migration Tool UI. And where did it open? Let's try that again. It's not opening.
Is it not running?
Let's see. Oh, there it is. Just took a few seconds to open. Okay. All right. So I'm copying over these files onto the VM. So I'm just going to put them here. The migration tool expects a certain folder structure. It expects you have a folder with the same name as the document type you're importing to. And then within that, a folder called documents that has the actual files you want to import. Okay, so I've got 2 of them open now, actually. So I'm going to close one and connect. And just come over to this import tab here and click. Here I've selected the parent folder of that doc type name folder. So you can put multiple subfolders under there for different document types. So I'm going to go load and pick this one. And I want to import documents. So I'll pick that and click run.
And for those of wondering, this DBXL Migration Tool does come with DBXL. It is a Windows app. We've had it out for a long time. Be seriously using old school dialogues here, but it's a tool that we use to do a lot of things with bulk imports.
Okay, so we've run into a little bit of a snag here since these documents were actually submitted to DBXL. They came from a form that actually submits them to both DBXL and SharePoint. And in that case, of course, there's no need to import them since they're already in DBXL. But in our case, we want to show them being imported. So here I'm just taking out the document IDs. So they're going to be uploaded as new documents.
It's a feature, right? It's not overwriting them.
Right, exactly. So let's just do one more here. Come on. Okay, so you, the people watching, you're definitely not going to need to do this. A little bit of a demo snag. Okay, so I'm going to try importing these again now.
You're very quick on your toes, Jay. And the reason why people watching, listening will not have this issue is because you're moving to DBXL. This solution is already in DBXL, and therefore it had to conflict with these doc IDs.
Right.
Okay, this form, just to clarify, this form actually submits both to DBXL and to the library. So you can have solutions where you store data in two places. We don't recommend that. Better to have all the data in one place so you don't have data integrity problems. But in this solution, it was actually submitting to the database, but it was also still submitting to SharePoint. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so you can see it found the 5 documents. You can see the names match. And it imported them. You can see the document IDs that it used for each one of them. And then, so now if we go into DBXL admin tool and look at the expense report, well, there's a number on that, 77993.
We should probably just show them the data map to the database table too.
Right. Okay. So 77993. So here are my 5 documents that have been imported. And yeah, we can go out to the database. These are actually in here. And you can see some email notifications coming in from these documents I imported because you've got an email mapping set up. Generally, you'd want to turn that off before you do a big import. So.
But the email rendering is a feature. That's our next demo.
Yeah, we are going to talk about that. Okay, so we look at here, and here are my five documents that have been mapped out to the database.
Awesome. And that's the target table. That's not the document table. That's actually the target mapping table, right?
Yeah, this is where they're mapped to.
Awesome. Great. Well, what's next? Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
So,
if people have questions, please don't hesitate to throw those questions into the question area. We'll watch for those. Yeah.
All right. So we're moving our form data into the database, into DBXL, which means they're not going to be in the library anymore, and we need a new way of visualizing them. So the way we deal with that is to use a dashboard form. And these can be pretty simple. It's just query from the table. You usually, sometimes you want some pagination, some column, sorting, fancy stuff like that. But it can be as simple or as complex as you want. We've done webinars on these before, so we recommend you check those out as far as how to put these things together. So you create your dashboard form. You use the same technique for querying from the database with the QueryDB service. You query from the tables. You can, if you want to aggregate data, like get status values from a separate table or a child table, or count things, you can set up views in your database that sort of match that data together. So we've actually today, Don we had a dashboard that actually queried from the SharePoint library. Don has gone and modified it to query it from this table now. So he's going to show us how that looks.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Don.
I'll just share out my screen.
Let's switch over to Don.
Yep. Switching over to Don. Sorry about that.
Okay, there we go. Thanks, Jimmy.
Yep.
Okay, so let me know if you guys are seeing my screen. Patrick, can you see the dashboard?
Yeah, can you just refresh it and see those items that Jimmy just imported? 657.
This is already refreshed.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, this is the dashboard. So it's just a simple one, and here we're just showing these columns. And for the query, this is what we have for the query string. So it's just showing these 5 columns. Now, Jimmy has showed how to build the query string using the query builder, and you can also add complex filtering for that. So so that you can use them on your dashboards. So, for example, I'd like to show items that are greater than $500 here. And then you can also perform an end type of filter. So here, I just like to show the rejected ones and paid ones. And if we look at the filter, I'll just show the debug section here and grab the string. This is how the filter is now going, or the query string is going to look like. So this is the filter, and here you have the complex filters filter section. So to build that in the DBXL at the query builder tab, you can insert filters here. So just click on insert comparison, and you can select the and or operator for this one. So you can select the columns and add your filter, and when you're done, say test and form name test. Click the build now and grab the query here. This is how it's going to look like. Now in the form, I used a nested repeating table. So here you'll see I have the status filters and the filter for the total here, and it's performing a double eval to linearize the string here. And since this is also a table, I performed another double eval to linearize everything here.
When we say double eval, that's the technique for concatenating repeating items together, right?
Right, from a column.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
So,
quite an esoteric
that's
command that is. That's great, Don. Hey, show us, this is just a form too, right? This, even though it's a dashboard, it's actually something you built using the InfoPath form template format, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Even though it's rendering in Forms here, we need to show them how to these forms in Forms Designer too. But yeah, so this is just showing you that these forms are actually things that you can create if you're familiar with how to create forms in InfoPath. You can do that in InfoPath Designer still. You can obviously use that Forms Designer to do the same thing. That's great. Any questions for Don on that? Just loading it in the designer. That's awesome. And there's our Forms Designer. Great. Awesome. Okay, we're running out of time, so let's go to the next demo. Jimmy, I guess I'll make you a presenter again. We can switch back to the slide deck.
Yeah. Okay, So the last demo is email notifications. So in SharePoint, you'll typically be using nowadays a flow for sending email notifications and workflow stuff like that.
Power Automate, right? If they renamed it.
Power Automate, right. So in DBXL, what we have are what we call email mappings or email notifications, where you can basically trigger an email to send out when a document is added or one is modified. So here in our expense report document type, we've got a couple of those. You generally have them different ones for different scenarios. So we've got one to send to the approval manager after an approval, to a manager for approval. So that'll usually be for the initial submit, and submitter after a certain approval steps. So if it's been paid, if it's been rejected. So the initial one is going to be this one. So let's just take a look at that. So we're saying we want it to submit both for new and existing. You might want to pick just for new, but we'll have both of them. There's a condition here, so when the status is equal to submitted, it'll send out. Otherwise, it won't. This one won't render. You can set a format for the email subject. Here we're using a bit of XPath to include the employee name, status, and then you pick a view from the form. So this is auto-populating with all the views that the form template has. We look over here, we can see it's got the same list of views. DBXL is figuring out that for us. And you tell it you want to send the contents of that view. So that's actually going to take the current XML document, render that view, put it in an email, and then send it out.
Show that view in Infograph Designer or wherever you're at a minute ago, just to show that.
Sure.
One of the big benefits of using DBXL to send notifications, compared to Power Automate, there's two big benefits, or there's three. The first one is that you can obviously do this more synchronously. So Power Automate has a 5-minute max latency, and I think you can get that down if you buy a premium Power Automate license. But in general, if you have a lot of these notifications, one after the other, then that 5 minutes can add up, and it can be a delay of 30 minutes for some things that have multiple emails coming out of them. Or more. And we had a customer actually that had this issue. They had a whole bunch of different email notifications going, and it was one after the other, and so Power Automate was just taking forever. And so this is synchronous. So when you submit to DBXL, it's just going to straight away submit the email. In fact, I just got 3 emails when Jimmy did that bulk import of 5. Maybe there's only 3 people that were that had me as their manager. So the other big benefit is what you're seeing here is that you can actually go in, unlike SharePoint Designer or unlike Power Automate, you can create the email body using the form view. So it's kind of more of a WYSIWYG editor for your form. You can add images to this. You can see Jimmy's got calculated values here for the data. So you get hello, and you can just reference values. So this makes it very easy to create these emails that are going out and maintain and manage them. It's a lot better than that experience that you may be familiar with Power Automate, where you go into that, that HTML editor thing, and you have to build the email body, and it's just this big formula. Or in SharePoint Designer, where it's a little bit better in SharePoint Designer. Actually, you do have somewhat of a WYSIWYG editor there, but of course SharePoint Designer is deprecated. The third big benefit, is the licensing cost. You don't have to have Power Automate license to do this. It's just DBXL will generate unlimited emails. I mean, usually with Power Automate, you can get around that by having one account that does the emailing. But yeah, sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah, and you can also define the logic here for how you want it to render, which I don't think those SharePoint options. I think it's probably more complicated if you're using those other options. But here we've just got a section. We actually got all the email formats here in this one view, and conditionally show whichever ones based on the current status using the actual field values.
Can you go back to DBXL and show them that not only can you generate these emails using a view, but you can also attach a PDF. You can see at the top there's the PDF, and we're not generating PDF here. I don't believe, but if you can select a view and generate a PDF from that, and then you can attach the PDF to the email. And why would you want to do that? Well, if people are on their mobile phone, you might want to give them a receipt, or not just mobile, it doesn't have to be their phone. It could be just email receipt of some form they just filled out, can confirm that you received it. So this is a really nice feature for replying back to the submitter.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Exactly. And if you want to use HTML as the body, you've got that option. You've also got plain text or an XPath expression if it's a really simple body. Then you've got your settings down here for who to send it to. You can use an XPath or you can use static values depending on your situation. Looks like I'm included as a BCC on all these, which explains why I see these from time to time. I'm going to remove myself. But yeah, but we did see a couple coming in as I was importing those. So let's just check those out. So this one was actually sent to me. It's got the form values here. As you can see, it's got the links that are generated based on the form values. This is the one that was sent to Patrick. Again, it's got the link, so I can just open up one of these, see if that works. It's probably going to open in other form template, but should be close enough.
The nice thing about those links also is that for those people that are on the go, they can just use the anonymous link to approve it without having to actually open the form.
Yeah, and of course those links are again just generated using logic in the form. We've got a hyperlink using a concat formula to put that together.
Yeah, great. Okay,
So that's,
yeah, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Let's go back to the slides real quick and do a quick recap here. So we showed today how to move data from your lists and your libraries into SQL using a couple tools that we've created. We're using our database accelerator web service on top of SQL to give you a web API to query and submit to SQL. And this DBXL web service is something we've had out since 2005. Lots of customers using it. It's got a ton of features. We showed several of those features in our demos today. We also have a tool, a migration tool that allows you to easily bulk migrate your forms in. Jimmy showed how to create the list tables using the form. We'll include that with the webinar kit, the package that we send you. And we also showed another feature in DBXL. It's kind of cool, this email feature. And let's go to the next slide, Jimmy. Okay, this is your opportunity to ask us more questions. I know that we've lost a couple of you, but if you have any questions, this is a great time. Let's go to the next slide. And just to quickly recap, Qdabra Forms is our replacement for InfoPath. You saw FormsViewer being demoed, and even Don demoed the Forms Designer today. We just shipped Forms Designer 1.0. Very happy about that. And it's taken us a long time. We spent the last 7 or 8 years, well, since 2014, so actually closer to 8 years. We spent many years building FormsViewer and making it feature-rich. The last 2 or 3 years, we've been focused on Forms Designer. We still are launching new versions of FormsViewer. In fact, next week, we're actually updating FormsViewer online. And for those of you who have the on-prem version, please contact us and we can help you update that. What are we adding next week to FormsViewer, Jimmy? I forget.
It's a couple of minor things. Being able to set certain more fine-grained controls on how to query lists anonymously. It's sort of an edge case. Mm-hmm. We've got a couple of it's going to include a couple of bug fixes for Forms Designer from the initial release, and one or two things I'm not thinking of.
Sounds good. Great. Let's just hit that last slide then and say thank you to everyone for being here today. We look forward to presenting again in a couple of weeks. We're probably going to take next week off with July 4th. I hope you're having a wonderful summer wherever you may be, or winter if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks to Jimmy and Don for putting this wonderful demo together for you. And yeah, Let us know if you have any questions. If you need help, we're going to have a quick survey for you, and then we'll send you the package later today. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.